Thank you. Good evening and welcome. This is a business license hearing to consider the decision of the Chief License Inspector to suspend the business license, quotes, business license, issued to Melanie Chin, the licensee, for a short-term rental accommodation at 301-33 West Pender Street, Vancouver, BC. Before we begin, I have some opening remarks. This hearing is being convened by electronic means as authorized under Part 14 of the Procedure Bylaw, and as such, panel members may participate in person or by electronic means. If a council member attending by electronic means loses connection during the voting process, staff are available to get you back online quickly while the voting process is suspended. Staff contact information has been circulated to you. Video of council members speaking and vote results will be projected on the live stream when available. For council members, I guess we can skip this part because nobody's participating by electronic means. We do acknowledge that we are on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. We thank them for having cared for this land and look forward to working with them in partnership as we continue to build this great city together. Clerk, may we have the roll call, please?
Chair Fry in the chair is present. Councillor Carr and Councillor Kirby-Yung. You have a quorum, Chair Fry.
Thanks, Clerk. We will start with opening remarks from Robert LeBlanc, Councillor for the City of Vancouver. Robert?
I will again introduce myself. It's Robert LeBlanc. The last name is spelled L-E-B-L-A-N-C. I am litigation counsel with the City of Vancouver, and I act as the city's prosecutor. We do have the licensee appellant here today, I believe. Ms. Chin, are you here? If you could just stand up and introduce yourself to the panel, please. Thank you. The hearing before the panel today is an appeal by the licensee of the Chief License Inspector's decision to suspend the business license issued to her on December 1st, 2020 for the provision of short-term rental accommodation at Unit 301-33 West Pender. A copy of that license issued on that date is included in the evidence package at tab 2. The suspension by the Chief License Inspector and the basis, therefore, is set out in the letter of September 27th, 2021. That, too, is in the evidence package that's before the panel, and that's at tab 12. And I'm just going to go to tab 12 now and read to you from the second full paragraph on the second page that sets out the decision of the Chief License Inspector with respect to the licensee. One of the conditions of the short-term rental business license is that the address must be your principal residence. A principal residence means the usual dwelling unit where an individual lives, makes their home, and conducts their daily affairs, including, without limitation, paying bills and receiving mail. The city has determined that in consideration of the totality of information, including supporting documentation, your submitted calendar bookings, the compliance inspection report, and information from the meeting, the information does not support that 301-33 West Pender Street is your principal residence, and it's on that basis that the suspension was made. The letter specifically stipulates that the suspension was due to failure to satisfy the Chief License Inspector that the subject premises was a principal residence. There's some language that's utilized in the letter that is reproduced in the definition of principal residence that is set out in the license bylaw. And I think it would be helpful to read to you from that definition. A principal residence unit means the usual dwelling unit where an individual lives, makes their home, and conducts their daily affairs, including, without limitation, paying bills and receiving mail, and is generally the dwelling unit with the residential address used on documentation related to billing, identification, taxation, and insurance purposes, including, without limitation, income tax returns, medical services plan documentation, driver's licenses, personal identification, vehicle registration, and utility bill. And for the purposes of this bylaw, a person may only have one principal resident unit. It was that definition under the license bylaw that the chief license inspector was not satisfied was made out on the evidence before her with respect to what was submitted by the licensee. Now, the witness today is noted in the order of proceedings as being the Chief License Inspector, Sarah Hicks. Standing in for Ms. Hicks today, though, is Deputy Chief License Inspector, Mr. Koji Miyagi. We will get to Mr. Miyagi shortly, and he will take you through the materials that are in the evidence book to explain the basis for the Chief License Inspector's decision to suspend. What the panel can expect to hear is an indication that the decision required a weighing of a claim of principal residency by the licensee against a number of other factors, namely high booking volumes, indicative of not full-time residents, the lack of documents supporting primary residence furnished to the city that predate the notice with respect to the audit, the indication of no personal items within the residence whatsoever, and inconsistencies with respect to evidence provided in the course of an interview and in the course of submitting other documents. The Chief License Inspector's submission then is that the conclusion that the evidence did not support principal residency was a reasonable one, that the suspension of the license logically flows from that, and that the suspension should be upheld. Of course, the licensee has the opportunity this evening to convince the panel otherwise. Before embarking on the evidence, there are some legal and procedural matters to note. The Chief License Inspector's power to suspend the business license is set out in Section 277 of the Vancouver Charter, which says that the Chief License Inspector shall have the power at any time summarily to suspend for such period as he or she may determine any license if the holder of the license has, in the opinion of the inspector, been guilty of such gross misconduct in or with respect to the license premises to warrant the suspension of the license. The submission is that the short-term rental of the property in the city that fails to comply with the regulations with respect to principal residency does amount to gross misconduct. This council's powers to review a business license suspension is further set out in that section. It states any person whose license has been suspended under this section may appeal to the council in accordance with the procedure for that purpose prescribed by bylaw, and upon such appeal, the council may confirm or may set aside such suspension on such terms as it may think fit. The panel's power to review a business license is further set out under Section 275 of the Vancouver Charter, which states that the granting or refusing of a license to an applicant, therefore, and the revocation or suspension of a license which has been granted shall be deemed to be in the discretion of council, and the council may grant, refuse, revoke, or suspend a license without stating any reasons, therefore, save in respect of a licensee who by reasonable efforts cannot be found. The council shall not revoke a license without giving the holder thereof an opportunity to be heard. And of course, that's why we're here this evening. This is an administrative hearing, and the rules of natural justice do apply. So I will ask that the panel keep in mind that the license holder is entitled to hear the allegations against them, which is comprised of both the evidence of Mr. Miyagi this evening and the evidence book that's been put before you. The licensee may respond to those allegations with evidence of their own. The licensee may ask questions of Mr. Miyagi or any other witness, and the licensee may make submissions on their own behalf with respect to what they believe the outcome of the proceeding should be. If you see fit to uphold the license, overturn it, or overturn it with the stipulation of adding conditions to the license, jurisprudence from the Supreme Court of Canada says that you do need to give some reasons for those decisions. So those are my opening remarks. As I'd indicated, the Chief License Inspector is only presenting the evidence of Mr. Miyagi this evening. If we could ask Mr. Miyagi to please take to the lectern and just introduce yourself to the panel, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. LeBlanc. Chairperson and members of council. My name is Koji Miyagi. I am the Deputy Chief License Inspector for the City of Vancouver. I'm also the Assistant Director of Community Standards. And today I have information regarding the investigation that led to this hearing. And as Mr. LeBlanc will guide us through the package, I'll be able to add further information to it.
Thank you, Mr. Miyagi. I understand one of your duties as a Deputy Chief License Inspector involves enforcement of short-term rentals and short-term rental licensing issues with the city. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that includes oversight with respect to audits that are conducted for enforcement purposes?
That is correct.
Now, you're here today with respect to the property at Unit 30133 West Pender. You've had a chance to review that file. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I should probably add, in my role as Assistant Director, I oversee 3 areas. One being proactive enforcement, and those are that's the area that oversees the short-term rental investigations. So they're my staff as well, and so I am quite versed in the work that they do, including this case file.
Now, with respect to this particular case file, I understand it was initiated for enforcement after the city received the complaint that is included under tab 3 of the evidence package. Is that right?
Yes, through the chair, that is correct. We received a complaint regarding the non-principal residence allegation of Ms. Chin's property.
Now, when the city receives such complaints, what action does it take?
We will look at all the information that's in there, and then we will start an investigation based on the research that then we follow up with the information that we received. And then depending on the complaint, that'll determine to what degree or to how far we continue the investigation. In this particular case, there was enough information to pursue this case file, if you will, to at the end, which is a verbal interview style audit. And that information is also included in here as well.
Okay, and we'll get to that. When the complaint was received in January 2021, my understanding is that there was some monitoring of the file and ultimately a decision to send the property and the associated license for audit. Is that right?
That is correct. And the sequence that we use now, members of the panel may think the complaint came in January and then we got to it in May. However, the May date is based on the background work that takes us to do this, and the volume of the work that we have does take some delays. And so hence sort of the timing. However, in the period from when we received the complaint to the time that we did the background investigation, we had submitted, we had requested an audit notification to Ms. Chin on the informations in the license that she obtained. The licenses are issued automatically, and so therefore we need to verify her primary residency through the documentation and other means.
Okay. So is that the purpose of the audit, to verify principal residency?
Yes, that's one of the primary reasons that we do the audit, and of course we also look at other considerations, safety as well as frequency of bookings and general compliance to the bylaw, the short-term rental bylaw.
In this case, you had a specific complaint with respect to it not being a principal residence, and so certain documents were requested so that you could conduct a further investigation of that.
Yes, through the chair, that is correct. And for all investigations, we do check the documentation. That's a fundamental step that we take. And as we go through this later on, you will see some of the challenges that we had obtaining that information.
Okay, let's then turn to tab number 4 in the evidence book. And we're looking at here registered mail to the licensee with respect to the business license. This is an audit notification letter that was sent to Ms. Chin by registered mail. Is that right?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct.
Okay. Perhaps I can just ask you to explain what documents the city is asking for in the audit notification letter and the purpose of those requests.
Yes. So we like to verify the principal residency through ideally government documentation. So ideally through not self-declared items, meaning although we do accept utility bills to a certain extent, those are all self-generated. You can request whatever address on there and they'll send that back. So ideally we like to see government documentation. And so we've identified here primary documentation as point A that supports the residency of that individual to that property. And then being the strata nature of this property, we also ask for a letter from the strata council that approves that particular unit. So we don't accept a generalized bylaw statement, but the Strata Council has to provide a letter to say that yes, that person can indeed support or engage in short-term rental activities. If this person was renting the place, in this case, she's not. She's the owner. But if there was a rental, we would also ask for a letter from the landlord. And then the other items are the web listings that they are listing under. And then any other information pertaining to if she has assistance, meaning a property manager, or she's engaged in somebody that would help her run the short-term rentals, we ask for that information as well. And then we also ask for a summary of your operational abilities, I guess. We call it an operational summary, but it really talks to how are you engaged in that property? How are you making sure that the place is safe? What methodologies do you use to engage with the clients that come? Just a number of points that will help us understand how you're operating the short-term rental.
Now, I understand that the city did receive a response to the audit notification letter from the licensee. Is that right?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Some of that correspondence is contained under tab number 9, which is a series of emails between city staff and the licensee. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. I'm actually going to ask you to turn to the last few pages under tab number 9.
Yes.
And I'll draw your attention to the first full email, which is on the second last page, which appears to be the licensee's submissions with respect to an answer to that audit notification letter. This is directed to Alexander Holmes. Ms. Holmes is part of the short-term rental team. Is that right?
Yes, she's the coordinator and she conducts the audits as well as leads the investigations. And in this particular case, yes, Ms. Holmes was also the auditor that interviewed her.
Okay. Now, the licensee's response did not fully answer the questions of the audit notification. Is that fair to say?
Yes, and so oftentimes when the information that we receive through this particular step is not clear to us or is not satisfactory, meaning it doesn't or they're not able to provide it, then we will engage in dialogue of this nature, but ultimately it can also lead to an interview audit, which in this particular case it did.
Okay.
Because the information that we had obtained through this initial approach wasn't as clear to us. Things that she mentioned about her boyfriend Tony being involved in the short-term rental, but living in Edmonton, and she wasn't. Her responses were yes, he's wasn't clear. It was perhaps contradictory. Where initially,
are we getting ahead of ourselves?
Oh, I'm sorry.
The interview.
I'm sorry. There were some points in here about her which I'd like to mention as well.
Sure.
But yes, the documents, the driver's license and whatnot, those weren't of the address. The bills that we received, they weren't, well, we didn't receive any actually, or we received very few. Some were addressed to her boyfriend, and the other ones were addressed to her parents in Edmonton. So it didn't support the requirements that we had.
Okay. And I am just looking at the third last page now, which are the emails under tab number 9, which is a response from Andrew of the short-term rentals group. And he sets out some of the problems with respect to this submission. And at his second paragraph, he indicates not only in the earlier paragraph that they need the Strata Council authorization, but that the BC Hydro invoices you sent display an Edmonton address, while the Shaw invoices are under another person's name,
Correct.
unaffiliated with your license. The request was then to please submit copies of 2 supporting documents, and some options were provided to her there.
That is correct. So those are 2 specific triggers that we have in our investigation that require us to look into a little bit further. The information, once again, didn't support the address that she was residing in or claiming to reside in.
And the reason you ask for such documents is one would expect that if it was somebody's principal residence, that they would have a utility bill or something to that effect indicating their address at the premises.
Yes, those are common ones that we receive. Driver's license is another common one that we receive or we voluntarily get without necessarily asking. Once again, we would like to see government type, and Andrew has stated that the type of information that is helpful. And later on, we'll mention as well. But the information that we received all came after the investigation started, and so this is well into May, June, and we understand that she had moved there in October of 2020, and so that delay in getting the updated information is another trigger for us to look at why this individual, if they're claiming to live there, have not changed all these, to our mind, fundamental documents that you would have, one would have if that's your principal residence.
Okay. If I could just maybe pick out what the highlight of what you said there was that in the course of the audit, you were not provided with any documents that were issued or dated prior to the audit notification that indicated that the premises was her primary residence.
Through the chair, that is correct.
Not a business license, or sorry, not a driver's license.
No, the driver license had, our understanding is an Alberta license.
And not a hydro bill, not a cable bill.
No,
Nothing.
None of those.
Okay. You did receive updates after the notification, is that right?
That is correct.
And that would be a BC driver's license that was issued after the notification, is that correct?
I believe so. And my apologies. I haven't confirmed about the driver's license piece yet. I'm assuming she has a BC driver's license now. I do know that the other bills that she provided, like BC Hydro and Tangerine, some of these other ones are dated well after the fact.
Okay, and some of those are under tab 5 in the evidence book.
Yes.
Under tab 5, we have a copy of the strata plan authorization. We have a copy of a BC Hydro bill that was purportedly changed to her 30133 West Pender Street after the audit. Is that correct?
That is correct. She did mention, well, during the audit, we can talk to that later, of the reasons why regarding her mail and why she had directed to her parents. But I can mention that later.
Okay. There's a Tangerine bill in here as well, correct?
That is correct. And so these, once again, aren't the greatest for us, but we do accept them if people don't have any other source of identification.
Okay. you'd indicated there was an explanation with respect to the BC Hydro bill. Maybe I'll just go back to tab 9, and now going to the fifth to last page. I know that's a little awkward for the panel to get to, but it's an email. The bottom of the page there is a date, June 16th, 2021.
Sorry, just let me just get to that. June 15th.
Five pages back. The email at the bottom of the page begins with, "Hi, Andrew. I have attached a letter from my strata in regard to the Edmonton
Yes.
address.
Yes.
In regard to the Edmonton address on my BC Hydro, when I bought the condo unit late last year, I had put my parents' home address in Edmonton, where I was living prior to purchasing my condo, as the mailing address since I was still in the process of moving to BC. That was the explanation with respect to the BC Hydro, correct?
That's correct, yes.
I understand that during the interview, which we'll get to in a minute, you were provided with a different explanation as to how that came to be.
That is correct.
We'll get to that. I think that what we can take from what you've just indicated is that a lack of supporting documents predating the audit notification was an initial red flag for the STR review team. Is that right?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct.
Okay. I understand also that you had an opportunity to review some of the booking information with respect to the unit, both on information supplied by the licensee and also through records that are shared with the city by Airbnb, correct?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct. And I do have a summary of that. What's provided in the package may not be as clear or it's not totaled. I have if I can go through the list.
What you're looking at there are the records provided to the city through Airbnb, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and those records indicate the nights that are booked for this particular unit for short-term rental purposes.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, if you could maybe just relay to the panel what you determined in terms of the frequency of the booking.
Yes, yes, of course, through the chair. So Ms. Chin indicated to us that October 2020, so October 2020, I'm not exactly sure of the date, was when she moved to 301 33 Pender, West Pender, from her previous home in Edmonton. Our records show her first short-term rental interaction to start October 17th. Ms. Chen had a short-term rental license issued to her October 6th. So in the month that she had moved in, she had already had 6 days booked. That's in October 2020. Then in November 2020, that's not even a month after she had moved in, she had 26 days booked. That's 86% of the month. Then in December 2020, she had 29 days booked. That's 93% booked out of the 31 days, 29 days. Then going into 2021, she had applied for 2021 short-term rental license, and those were issued automatically. In January, I'm just going to go through this relatively quickly. January 2021, she had 21 days booked. February 2021, she had 16 days booked. March, she had 13 days booked. April, 21 days booked. May, 18 days booked. June, 16 days. July, 21 days. August, 24 days. And then in September, 13 days. And by September 2021, on September 27th, that's when we had issued her a suspension notice. But throughout from June to September, she knew that she was being investigated. And then in October, after her suspension, and we suspect maybe this is because she already had it booked, but she had 5 days booked in October, even though her license was suspended in September or end of September. So to our record, Ms. Chin has one of the most aggressive frequencies of bookings of STRs to our record.
I didn't crunch the numbers as you were going through there, but it's fair to say that the total number of bookings at the suite was well over half of the days in any given month.
Yes, yes. So I did the percentages, and it's 86%, 93%, 68%, 57%. March was 41%, April 68, May 58, 53, in June 68%, 77%, and then 43% in September, and then 16% in October again. So yes, these are arguably all pretty much over. If you average this out, it comes out to about 60 whatever percent, which is very, very high. And when you consider the COVID implications, and when you consider the tourism being relatively slow during that period, this is extremely high.
Some of those dates are supported by the booking information that was provided by the licensee that's also included under tab 5. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Those records, though, just start in, it looks like the end of April, and then go through to October 2021.
Yes, and through the chair, just on this information, this is information that she provided, so Ms. Chin provided, and we often cross-reference with the information that we have.
And that's the confirmed bookings through Airbnb.
Correct, and the information that I have is a bit more fulsome, and it does go into 2022, which I believe is an important point of information as well.
So fair to say this is red flag number 2. We have bookings in excess of 60% of nights over the period of roughly 10 or 11 months?
Yes, approximately 10 or 11 months, yes.
I am going to then ask you to move to tab 6 in the evidence book, please.
Yes.
And if you could just tell the panel what we're looking at there.
Yes, so this is the this is an order. It's a legal notice that we post on the door, and or we mail out. This is to request for a detailed access order. Now, sometimes we don't need to do this if we get volunteer compliance to say, come on in and take a look. In this particular case, we had to do a detailed access order. And so then this was issued on July 16th. And then we were able to gain access in August.
And photographs taken during that August inspection are contained under the second tab, or the next tab, sorry, tab number 7.
That is correct. Through the chair, these photos are indicative of what our inspectors found, and also, if you will, another red flag for us to investigate further. The cupboards, the kitchen cupboards, for example, this is typical in some ways of a very high booked, or in our case, we call it a sanitized unit where it looks commercialized. And we find it very similar to a hotel where you have minimal items of personal belongings, if none at all. So in this particular case, in the cupboards, we see what would typically be for a booking rather than somebody that's living there full time. We see other cabinets, those are empty. We see the fridge completely empty or virtually empty. We see closets, no clothes, and very little items, if you will. We see the pantry or the towels and whatnot, very little items as well. We also understand that Ms. Chin owns a dog, and I also look after animal services. And so I do know about the dog licenses, and her license was issued in June. So this is prior, so she had licensed her dog prior to this visit that we had in August, and in nowhere in the visit did we see any dog goods, either dog food or dog treats, dog water dishes, which is very uncommon if somebody owns a German Shepherd in their property. So that's another indicator of not in the spirit of the bylaw where principal residency is claimed.
Essentially, I'm looking at photographs that look as though they've been completely depersonalized of any individual belongings whatsoever.
Through the chair, that is correct. And in the interview, we ask about that, and when we get to that, we can provide you with the explanations that she gave us, and then what we think of that.
Okay. Let's move to the next tab then. So this would be red flag number 3, a completely depersonalized principal residence.
That is correct.
Okay. Next tab is tab number 8. Can you tell us what we're looking at here and whether this has any bearing on the decision to suspend?
Yes, through the chair, this is a checklist that our inspector uses, so we try to be consistent with our approach to all the inspections that we do, and we do hundreds of them. It does talk about the safety aspect of it as well, but this information is also used and verified that the inspection was done in its consistent approach, and that we're looking at all the safety aspects as well that's required, and indications of any non-compliance.
And I'm sorry, I may have missed that, but that's filled out by the inspector who took the photographs?
That is correct.
At the time that the photographs?
At the time of the photographs, so August 17th is when it's dated, so this was filled out on the day and time that they had visited the site.
As a result of those red flags, what was the next step that was taken with respect to the investigation of the property?
Yeah, so through the chair, what we frequently do when at this stage, the inspection is sort of the final trigger, if you will. It verifies the likelihood that we suspect this property is not likely used as a principal residence. It also is a trigger for us to look at potential commercial type operations. So when we see this and the other information about when we compound all the information we've obtained to date, then we go to a interview audit where we talk to the individual directly, and we have a series of set questions that we ask, and then we like to give the opportunity for the person also to explain some of these things and the anomalies that we see.
And that interview took place September 16th, 2021?
That is correct, yes.
And the practice of the members of the STR team that conduct the interview is to take thorough, detailed notes of the questions and the responses that are given by the licensee. Is that right?
Yes, through the chair. Now, we used to do these in person, but because of COVID, we do these either over the phone or through WebEx or through a video process. I believe this one's done either videoly or by phone. We do have 2 individuals that record. So, and Ms. Holmes is the coordinator at Short-Term Rental, and she led the audit questions. And Andrew, identified here, Menzies, he is a clerk and he scribes the information that we're provided, so that we are trying to be very accurate in terms of the information that we obtain.
Okay, maybe you can just advise at a cursory level what information was shared with the interviewers of the STR team during the course of the interview.
Yes, through the chair, we do like to verify those key elements, and one is obviously the documentation. And so when we asked about the driver's license, we asked about, why don't you have one? In this particular case, she had provided us an explanation about why her driver's license was not a BC one, although, and she indicated it was just timing that she hadn't renewed it. But I do know from ICBC that once you move to BC, you have 30 days to turn your license into a BC license. So for her to say it was just timing and she hadn't done it, 8 months into it was something that's still not a good sign for us. Then we also asked about about her other documents where why weren't they submitted earlier with the correct dates, and these were all done after the fact. And we asked about her parents on the BC Hydro bill. And at that time, she had claimed that her mailbox gets broken into. And so she felt unsafe to have her mail directed there. And she indicated that at that time, it was also broken. So therefore, she had used her mother's address. And
Maybe we can just go to that that portion. I'm looking at the notes taken by Andrew Menzies, which begin halfway through tab 10, and it's at page 2 of Mr. Menzies' notes.
yes,
Just tell me when you're there, Mr. Miyachi.
yes, I believe. Is this the one where? So MC is Miss Chen. My parents' address. Is that the page?
Bottom of page 2, these are Mr. Menzies' notes. Mr. Menzies' notes start halfway through the tab.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You may be looking at the ones at the
I
beginning.
was looking at Alex's. Yes, my apologies. Yeah, Mr. Menzies.
Page 2.
Page 2. Yes.
And just sort of start 2/3 of the way down the page. AH is Alexandra Holmes, and MC is the licensee, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Mr. Menzies is taking notes.
Yes.
And there's some questions about were you driving on your out-of-province DL before that? Yes. Why didn't you change it earlier? Just time. Where are you coming from? Edmonton, Alberta. And then there's a question. So you left in October. Answer, yes. Why didn't you change your address with BC Hydro? Why put your mailing address in Edmonton?
Yes.
Answer, that's my parents' mailbox. The mailbox on Pender is often broken into. And then the question by Ms. Holmes. So you had it at Pender before, then changed it? Yes, mailbox was broken into. Important docs go to my parents' house. So the information provided in the course of the interview was different in terms of the address for the BC Hydro bill than what the licensee had provided in the earlier email.
That is correct.
In one case, she provided the email of her parents' address at the time that she purchased it, and in the interview, she provided information about changing it only after there was a break-in at the Pender Street address.
Yes. Yes. And that's exactly correct. We found that anomaly to also be an interesting point for us that helped us render our decision.
Okay. The other thing that you noted there earlier was some information provided with respect to her boyfriend, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And there was a point, this is at page 3 of Mrs. Holmes's notes, where Ms. Holmes is asking about the boyfriend.
Yes. Yes.
And she asks, this is at the middle of the page, you note in the operational summary that you stay with your boyfriend when there are guests. Where does your boyfriend live? And a note that Ms. Holmes puts in saying that his email address is for a restaurant in Edmonton. The answer from the licensee was lives at 55 Alexander Street. Ms. Holmes is very cagey and asks, does your boyfriend have a connection to Edmonton? And the answer from the licensee is no.
Oh.
Ms. Holmes then puts to the licensee, in the documentation you provided us, there's an email from him and his signature has the address in Edmonton. Answer from the licensee, that's his business. Question, so if he has a business there, he has a connection to Edmonton? Answer, I don't know.
Yes. That was also a point of confusion for our interviewers, as you you would think that you would know about what your boyfriend does. Now, once again, that's up to her. But I guess we were suspect of the inconsistencies in the nature of the response, and then some of the hesitancy of her responding. Her boyfriend Tony is well acquainted with her. Is the impression that we got. She uses him as the Shaw account holder and her insurance as well. And yet we find out later on that she's not quite aware what he does or a connection in Edmonton. So in generality speaking, this when we do these audits and we come across inconsistent information or just information that seems to in the forefront doesn't seem to be that complicated to respond, but we find a very convoluted answer to it. So that starts to question the overall integrity of the responses that we're getting.
And I take it that you then take those concerns and the direct answers and then have to weigh the balance of the evidence in terms of what you're prepared to accept and what you're not prepared to accept as being true at the end of the day.
Yes, that is very accurate. We also ask about in this particular case, we asked about her employment, not to be nosy, but just where do you work? Because we want to know if you are living somewhere else, and we have cases with snowbirds and whatnot, or students who study overseas that are away for a chunk of time. And so we like to determine some of those things through this audit process. We asked her about her employment, and through our research, we got the sense that she worked in Edmonton as a dental hygienist, and that information was readily available. We asked her about what she does in Vancouver, if she's doing that, and she refused to answer or provide information to that nature. So once again, we didn't feel it was that threatening of a question. It was information that we're hoping to obtain to get a better picture of her circumstances, and yet we weren't able to ascertain that response. And so once again, that adds to our question of the validity or the integrity of the responses.
And I think I may have found that passage in Ms. Holmes's notes where there's a question in terms of the employer. This is at page 3 of her notes. We're still there.
Yes.
And under the heading section to review the submitted operational summary, the indication. Let's just start with the questions. How much time have you stayed at your boyfriend's since you moved there? Answer: every other week. Ms. Holmes then asks, so staying for a week and coming home for a week? And the answer is yes. So there seems to be an acknowledgement that at least at the very most, it's a half-time residence. With the answer then to do you work in the city? The answer yes, as a dental hygienist, temping all around. And another side note from Ms. Holmes indicating that the dental office site in Edmonton has her listed as a hygienist with an online presence referring to Edmonton. So she's noted as on the company's website as working in Edmonton. Is that right?
That is correct, and that's the information that we were trying to question. Do you live in Edmonton? Are you working in Edmonton? Or are you actually here?
Okay. And Ms. Holmes then asked, you're still connected to the dental office in Edmonton? Answer, yes, but the owner owns a couple of clinics in Vancouver, so I temp there. Question, have you worked in Edmonton since you moved here? Answer, no. Question, would you be comfortable telling me a clinic that you were temping at in the city? Not at this time, no, is the answer. So you weren't able to verify exactly where the workplace was.
That is correct. And so with the information that we have, we could also conclude that perhaps she lives in Edmonton for part of the time. We weren't able to confirm that through our dialogue, so yes.
Okay, thank you. Just moving on then, tab 11. We have some, maybe you just tell us what are submitted here. It looks like there's some other invoices dating to
Yes. So these are, through the chair, these were invoices that she provided to us to show that the address is where she resides. Um, just to know, this Trust Clean Vancouver is a company that she hires to clean her short-term rental, is our understanding. Um, we look at these, but there is a weighing on the value of this information because she hires these folks to she can request any address to be put on there, and that's what they'll put on there. However, we did note it in the information. Um, Once again, though, these pieces of information were submitted to us after the fact.
Tab 12 then sets out the decision of the Chief License Inspector. And the Chief License Inspector goes over the fact that she considered all of the information that you've now relayed to us. Is there anything in that suspension letter that you want to point out to the panel?
We'd like to note that it is a totality of the information that she's provided. We like to be able to convey to the panel that we have taken months of research to do this. It's not an arbitrary decision that we make. And we make careful considerations based on a number of pieces of information that we get from ourselves and also from the individual. So the decision is not made lightly. I do, and I can also attest to the fact that we all meet with the Chief License Inspector when we come to these decisions to weigh all the factors as well. And so in this particular case, we were not convinced that this property is her primary residence, or it's not used in the manner that Mr. LeBlanc had explained earlier about what we feel, what the city feels, what the bylaw feels is the primary residence.
Thank you. I don't think that we need to go through tab 13. That's the dispute request for or the appeal request for the decision of the suspension. Do you want to say anything about tab number 14?
No. Well, so tab 14 is also our method of looking at listings. And it does show that there are numbers of documented stays in October and September 2021, and so on and so forth. This goes all the way back to October of 2020. And so this particular information is, we try to line this up with the information that is provided by the individual. So this one goes back to October, and that's some of the information that I was relaying to you earlier. So this is part of our investigation piece that we wanted to provide to the panel as well.
Thank you. Is there anything else you wanted to say?
Yes, if I may. I'd like to add that she had indicated that that she believes the city is placing judgment on her living. And in her specific words, she says, "I think your team's investigation is based on personal projections and conservative and judgmental mindset of how one chooses to live." And that's her quote. I'd like to state that the intent of our investigation is not about passing judgment on how one lives. The city does, however, have rules that individuals need to follow when operating a legal short-term rental operation in Vancouver. By obtaining a short-term rental license, an individual voluntarily agrees to follow all the requirements of the short-term rental bylaw. This is not particularly difficult to follow, in our opinion. Many people who have short-term rental licenses do so and are following the bylaw in order to operate a legal short-term rental. To obtain a business license, a short-term rental business license in this case, is a choice that a person makes, which we believe they make at their own will, their own free will. There are responsibilities and obligations a license holder will need to make to their neighbors, to their landlords, if that applies, to stratas, and to the city that is connected to holding and operating a legal short-term rental business. The city's concern with this particular case is that Ms. Chin seems to be deviating from the spirit of the bylaw, where the intent is to earn supplemental income by making space available at your primary residence, where one does their daily living. To the city, and based on her explanation that she provided and the booking information that she shared with us, and we also have, the reasons for her purchase and residency of this condo appears to be first, financial gain, and then second, a place where she could stay maybe briefly in between those bookings. By not living at your place of residence is the degree that she is absent from every month she took, by not living at your place of residence to the degree that she is absent from every month she took possession, raises questions on her validity that this is her primary residence, which is at the heart and the fundamental requirement of having a short-term rental license and operating a legal short-term rent business in Vancouver. Ms. Chen may claim that her 30133 West Pender is her primary residence. However, her bookings and all the evidences and the statements that we've received may indicate otherwise. And to the city, her short-term rental operations appear more like a commercially operated hotel suite than a legal short-term rental business. If Ms. Chen may want to reconsider having a short-term rental business if the bylaws seem to be too restrictive to her. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Just to recap then, the 4 points that form the basis with respect to the suspension. No reliable documentation establishing residency, permanent resident, or primary residency prior to the audit notification is one.
That is correct, yes.
The second is an inspection of the premises that revealed no personal items of any kind within the short-term rental unit.
Yes, that supports the first and yes.
The third would be the booking volumes indicating over 60% of the time booking over a period of 10 to 11 months.
Yes, that coincides with the appearance of the suite.
And fourth, the inconsistencies in terms of the information that was provided by the licensee in the course of the investigation.
That is correct. These questions we ask are intended to be fairly easy to answer, but the manner that we received them or didn't receive them is another indication.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my questions for Mr. Mianji.
Okay, thank you very much. Panel members, do you have any questions for the witness? Seeing none. Does the licensee or licensee's counsel have any questions for the witness? Seeing none. Okay, we will now move on to opening remarks from the licensee or licensee's counsel.
Hello, I'm Melanie. I have brought with me a couple of things here to hopefully try and further prove my residency here. I'm not sure how I'm able to show these guys to you, but I can certainly describe it and then figure something out after, unless Tina's got an idea.
Yeah, Tina can circulate that.
Right? I sure can, but should I just describe them right now, or I can email to them? Oh. Yes. Do you want it right now, or should I email it right now or after? Sure. Yeah. So I do have my BC assessment form here with my address on there that I'll send to Tina. And then she can send it to you guys as well. And then I've got my mortgage from the TD with my Pender unit primary residence address that I can send to you guys as well. And then while I have been in Vancouver, I've taken up some day trading with Questrade. I've got a document here from them as well. Okay. And I also wanted to let you guys know that my strata had a meeting on September the 23rd, and we were appointing new strata council members, and I have volunteered to be part of the council, but I have also appointed Tony, my boyfriend, as a point of contact for that one. I have the documentation here so that we can address any issues along with the strata. And I can send that to you as well, Tina, if you would like that. And the reasons for wanting to join the strata is because I wanted to make some changes for the better, especially with the mailbox break-ins. Our front door window has just been broken in the last couple of days, so now there's just a wooden plank over it. And we're trying to figure out some ways to make the front a little bit safer for everyone in the residents of 33 Living Pender there. Did you get all those emails, Tina? Yes? I just sent that last one to you. Hopefully you guys can see it okay. Sorry? Sure. Got it? Sure thing. That was the last email. Thank you, Tina.
Okay, so we have your 2022 BC assessment, your 2021 year-end mortgage, your Quest trade, and I guess we're just waiting. Oh, and here we go. And the joining of the Strata document.
That is correct.
Yep. And did you have opening remarks you wanted to?
I just wanted to say that I'm trying very hard to try to prove my residency here. I know there was a few delays at the beginning, and it's just me being lazy, honestly, and I just don't have excuse for that. And your audit just kicked me in the butt. I was like, gotta get things done. So, but I'm really trying hard to prove my residency here, and I just don't know how else I can get more documentation to support that.
Okay. If that's your statement, I can ask if the panel members have questions for you.
Please.
Sure. Panel members, do we have any questions for Melanie Chen? Okay. Seeing none. Mr. LeBlanc, do you have any questions for the witness?
Don't have any questions for the witness.
Okay. Seeing no questions then, thank you. We're going to move on to closing submissions by the City of Vancouver's Council.
I'm going to start by just indicating that this is an appeal that's brought by the licensee for reconsideration of a decision that's already been made. The onus is on the licensee to establish that there was something incorrect in the considerations by the Chief License Inspector. There wasn't very much provided to this panel to persuade us that in fact this still remains this is a primary residence of the licensee. I think that the panel needs to be mindful of a couple of things. First of all, this isn't a criminal case. The Chief License Inspector didn't need proof beyond a reasonable doubt of whether or not the unit was used as a principal residence. What the Chief License Inspector had before her was a body of evidence that she had to weigh and come to a determination as to whether or not it established that the unit satisfied the principal residency criteria. That evidence included inconsistencies in terms of the information that was shared by the applicant or by the licensee. It included evidence of a completely empty apartment, devoid of anything, even dog food of a German Shepherd that she may own. It included no food, no personal effects whatsoever. It looked like a commercial unit. And I think that that was the point that Mr. Miyagi was trying to make. Not only did it look like a commercial unit, the booking of it exceeded 90% in some months. So take that and weigh that to the fact that there was nothing that was submitted prior to the audit notification that would have indicated principal residency. The only reasonable conclusion that the Chief License Inspector could have come to was that this didn't meet the definition of principal residence under the license bylaw. And I read out that definition to you. I can go back to it because ultimately this panel needs to decide whether that was a reasonable call by the Chief License Inspector. Chief License Inspector decided that it was not established that this was a usual dwelling unit where an individual lives, makes their home, and conducts their daily affairs, including without limitation paying bills and receiving mail, and is generally the dwelling unit with the residential use on documentation relating to billing, identification, taxation. At the time of making her decision, the Chief License Inspector had none of that information. I'm hard-pressed to say that any new information has been put before this panel to persuade it otherwise. The decision of the Chief License Inspector was not unreasonable in the circumstances and respectfully should be upheld. I'll also say that it should be upheld not only because it was reasonable, but also because I think it's important that this panel take into consideration that it's important to maintain public confidence in the integrity of the regulatory scheme. A great amount of investment has gone into Airbnb enforcement by the city. It's expected not that our citizens are lazy with respect to submitting information to establish that they're within the parameters that have been established by this council, but it is to be fulsome and diligent in terms of establishing those things so that they can participate in that regulated activity. And that hasn't been done. Respectfully, I think that overturning the decision of the Chief License Inspector would undermine that public confidence in this particular case. So I'm going to, I'll close there and say that I think it's appropriate in the circumstances that the decision be upheld.
Thanks, Mr. LeBlanc. Any reply or closing submissions from the licensee?
I just wanted to say that the information that you had with the when Andrew came to the place, I did have a booking that was coming in a couple hours, so I had the place all cleaned out so that there was nothing left behind of mine that the guests could take. And I also wanted to say that a lot of things have changed in the last couple of months in terms of my life, my career, and it has taken a different path for me to be a little bit more just taking a different career path. So it is more home based, and I have spent a lot of time just self reflecting. Here, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And I just don't know how else I can share with you that this is my home now. And that is where I live. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We'll now move to discussion by the business license hearing panel. Discussion from Mr. Carr.
Yes, thanks, Chair Fry. Is it possible in this discussion to ask questions of our counsel, our legal counsel?
I believe that point has passed. I'm going to look to the clerk. Clerk, is it still permissible to ask questions of counsel? To the chair. I guess I okay, sure. Okay, great, thank you. Please then.
Thank you. Yes. So my first question is, in terms of the additional information that was provided, that was provided tonight regarding the TD mortgage, the BC assessment letter, day trading with Quest Trade, the Strata meeting, are those types of evidence that would conclude that the permanent residence is indeed at that address?
I can't speak for the chief license inspector on that. It is certainly something that she could have taken into consideration at the time and weighed it with the balance of the evidence. And I suppose that that's something you can do today as well. Weigh that against the information that was shared with the chief license inspector. Respectfully, the information on those documents doesn't have to be correct or reflective of a permanent residence or a primary residence of a person. And I think Mr. Miyagi's point was that the reason why they place more weight on documents that are dated prior to the audit notification is because it's much easier to cover your tracks afterwards to satisfy the audit requirements by changing addresses or signing up for new accounts and whatnot. So I think through Mr. Miyagi's evidence, the issue is that the practice is to put less weight on documents that are received after the audit notification process than ones received or ones dated before. Does that help?
Yeah, that's very helpful. Can you also answer this question? Regardless of the decision that's made tonight, is it possible for Ms. Chen to actually later on have verification that this is her principal address and reapply for a short-term rental license?
I think that that's a question for Mr. Miyagi. This is a 2021 license that we're dealing with. We're now in 2022. I don't know what the process would be in terms of reviewing or accepting a new license application.
Thank you. Through the chair, we would look into continuing to suspend the 2022 license if she was to apply. There are steps that we would look at. For example, if she was to apply, and we would certainly need to look at her intent. Her operation plan would be very important. It's the high bookings that really concern us. So the addresses are one thing, but it's the high booking behavior that really needs to be converted. Currently, she's listing 30 days, for example. And if you are listing for 30 days, that tells me that, well, how can you be living there permanently if you're able to book this for 30 days?
Okay. Thank you. That's sufficient information for me. I'm not sure if the other panelist has any information, but or questions. But if not, I am prepared to put forward a motion.
Sure. Please proceed.
Okay, I have circulated that motion. Have you received it? I emailed it to amendments or whatever the normal one we use. It's sent to council meeting amendments at 7:20. Do you have it? Okay. Okay. Meanwhile, I'll speak to, or assuming it's going to be received. Okay. My motion is to uphold the chief license inspector's decision to suspend the business license issued to Melanie Chin, the licensee for a short-term rental accommodation at 30133 West Pender Street, Vancouver, due to lack of supporting evidence verifying the licensee's principal residence as 30133 West Pender Street. And so, you know, I have to say, in reading all the documents and hearing the evidence, I have to concur that there is no reliable document during that period of time in specific where that we are looking at verifying the principal residence. maybe it'll change going forward, but we are looking at a particular period of time. And I think that was corroborated by the inspection of the premises with no proof well, no personal effects and real proof of this being the permanent and primary residence. Plus, as has been noted, the short-term rental bookings and the volume, the very high volume consistently over the year. And the inconsistencies in turning, looking backwards at, when the addresses and how the addresses changed and that kind of thing. So, my hope is that this will change in the future and that after a period of time there, if it's not for this year, but in the future, there is an ability to reapply with verification of and ability to show proof of principal residence at that address. And those are my comments to the motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Seconder? By Councillor Carr, seconded by Councillor Kirby-Yung. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Would somebody like to move a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Seconder?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? The motion carries, and this hearing is adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, staff.